Welcome to the lower Tunguska River. I thought I would make a first video. I wanted to wait, and it's been a couple days now since it's been out. And I wanted to wait till I had a chance to really test a few things. And so this is going to be about some of the techniques, some of the ways in which Tunguska is working. And we're going to go over, I think I'm going to work in three different sort of approaches to this video. The first being this spot. So we're starting with bottom fishing. But the other thing I want to say is just right now, almost everything is working. And so if you are really wanting to float fish, even though I'm not going to show you float fishing, there are really good float fishing spots here. If you're wanting to stand on the bank and use a spinnerbait, kind of like you would at Balaya, and catch a lot of really nice salmon, trout, that kind of stuff, there's places for you to do that. If you want to spin fish from the shore, casting way out, there's plenty of spots to do that, to combo with bottom fishing. If you want to troll, there's really good trolling. And so there's just a lot of things working right now. I'm going to highlight three. This first one is at 144.86. This is where we are on the map. And this was the very first place I fished at Tunguska after I got out of the boat. And if you've seen anyone stream lately, including myself or others, if you've seen, looked at the VK site, even maybe other YouTube videos, if people got out videos really fast after the map came out, then you've probably seen this spot. There's a reason why it was the first place I ever fished, and that's because it was the first spot ever posted on VK, at least that I can tell, about good spots to fish here. And so I think because it was the first spot mentioned, and because it just happens to be a really decent spot to fish, that's why you're seeing so much of this spot. To be fair, though, even though other people have talked about this spot already, I've spent a lot of time here, and I just didn't feel right about not sharing it on this video, even though maybe you already have heard about it. But in case you haven't, I want to mention it here. And so let me go over the setups. We're going to hang out here just for a little bit, and I'm going to hope that we get lucky and get a decent fish for you to see during the evening. And then as soon as it hits about 4 a.m., we'll jump in our boat, and we're going to show you some other things. I'm going to show you a little bit of wacky rig, and then maybe briefly do a little bit of actual trolling. So let's start with this spot. We are basically, you can cast straight out. I mean, obviously we're hitting this 12-meter hole. Sometimes I feel like I have the best luck a little bit left of straight, and I am clipped at 50 meters. And we will check to see if there's a fish on here in just a second. I am using rhino beetles, and some of that is because of all of the like baits you dig for and special baits and stuff. That's the one that I have the most of, but I'm not sure it's the best. It does work, and you catch a decent amount of sturgeon on that. And so, but the truth is, any of your baits that you think of would typically catch sturgeon or sterlet are probably going to work in this spot. And the fish that we're wanting to catch here are sturgeon, sterlet, burbot, and catfish. Catfish are very desirable here at this river, and if we catch one, I'll show you why. So this second rod is an interesting one. Ramps actually caught a really nice sterlet on these boilies. And the only thing I'm doing different than what it's appeared that Ramps did is I've added PVA to it. And here's the PVA we're using on all three. It seems like the caviar smell attractant is going with the pretty standard sturgeon PVA quite nicely. And then on the third rod, we've got what is probably pound for pound the best bait to use in this spot right now is night crawlers. And the reason why is it seems to catch all of this fish we're going for here with some frequency, especially the catfish. And like I said, the catfish are a lot smaller than catfish you're used to in other bodies of water. They're worth more at small sizes, and so they're very desirable to catch here. One thing to note about the catfish is sometimes they will get on your line and not pull that hard because they aren't that heavy. And so sometimes you just have to check to see if maybe you have one on there. I think think there's a chance we have a fish on right now, so we're going to go through and we're going to go ahead and check. Okay, so nothing on that one. Even though the lines were moving, it appears as there was not anything. And you can stay at this spot sort of all day long. We won't do that because we're going to check out some other approaches to fishing here. But this spot certainly does work 24/7 with some reasonable bite frequency. And during the day, there's a lot of options. You can sort of have 2 rods out catching the sturgeon and sterlet and other stuff. And then with your 3rd rod, you can float fish right off of the bank. You can spin fish right off the bank. Sometimes at night, I've been able to catch eastern bream here, although I would not say that this is an eastern bream hotspot. Usually only 1 or 2 comes out a night if I put 1 line in for eastern bream. Okay. By the way, and Ramps noted this in the post he made about these boilie setups. He did catch a very nice sterlet. However, he also noted that the bite rate is pretty slow. So you may not want to use that setup. But because such a nice sterlet came out, I've sort of had 1 rod with that on there to sort of test it myself. Best bite frequency for me has been night crawlers and crayfish, not crab, crayfish. I've really been able to dial into the crayfish pretty well here with catching sterlet. The crayfish have dialed into the sterlet pretty well, especially, compared to the other ones, sort of randomly catching a lot of different things. I feel like the crayfish have particularly been good at targeting sterlet. So there's your first catfish of our video. And again, these are just really nice. You see, even the small ones, decent XP, decent size to become a marker. So, and they certainly go on up to 4 to 6 kilos is probably the larger end, at least at this point that we're seeing. So because it's overnight, I wanted to show you that bait. We'll put crayfish in just once and see if we've got a large one hook on here. See if we can get a sterlet on the crayfish while we're sitting here. But in terms of having a decent bite rate, I think putting night crawlers in here is probably the way to go. In fact, let's go ahead and change this. I've at least been able to show you this bait combination. I've caught a couple fish. I haven't had a really big fish on these boilies yet, but it has been working. I think when you add the PVA, it's not quite as slow a bite rate, which has been nice. But you may want to try that. But let's go back to really just more night crawlers since it's nighttime, and sort of see what that brings us. I like going size 2 hooks. Feels like, I guess maybe because the catfish aren't that big, and the PVA bug is just killer. And at least for me, I would rather get. I'm trying to decide if I want to put a leader. I think I do. I would rather get sterlet, nice sterlet versus sturgeon. I'm just not huge into like wrestling huge sturgeon. So, but what I have seen is you can have really good burbot nights in this spot if you put night crawlers in. So again, night crawlers kind of gives you an opportunity to catch a lot of different fish. A better opportunity. Okay, it looks like we are getting a bite here off crayfish. I hope that it's a sterlet, because that has been my experience so often on this bait. But because it is overnight hours, it might change that some. I'm wondering if it's, I haven't really noticed, but I'm wondering if it, here in the overnight hours, it is like a majority of catfish and burbot. No, that is going to be a sterlet. So the crayfish continues to come through with, for me at least, with targeting sterlet particularly well, which I just really, I appreciate. I mean, like I said, I think you can make pretty decent silver, pretty decent XP, and then you also don't have the drawn out sturgeon battles. But some people love those, so that's just kind of me. All right, I'm just going to guess we're going to mostly see burbot given the time and given that we're using night crawlers. But hey, there is nothing wrong with catching some decent burbot and then especially during the early morning and daytime transitioning to sturgeon and sterlet. That's a small one. I was hoping we could land a, I think the largest burbot I've had here is probably, I think I had a 7 or 8 kilo one last night or yesterday sometime. Ooh, it's a little catfish. Nice. Okay. All right, let's see if we got another sterlet here. It's a burbot. It's a nice one too. That's probably the largest one I've caught in this spot. That is a very nice one. So we'll stay with the crayfish. I just really like crayfish here. I mean, obviously night crawlers is so much of a quote unquote cheaper bait because you don't have to farm it and all that. It's relatively inexpensive, but and some people have asked me if I would consider doing a video on all the new reels, especially what the new reels mean for low-level players. And I'm going to continue to try to look at them as I can and sort of get my thoughts together. Probably the next time that will happen, honestly, is when we start a leveling series and then try to spend some intentional time thinking about how things have changed. I'm still wrapping my own mind around what the implications are for the new light and even heavy conventional reels, and at what point as someone is leveling up do conventional reels maybe come into play in a way that would be different than sort of my experience leveling up. So I'll continue to put thought into that and try to look into it more and more, and I want to sort of test out a conventional reel at some point. I mean, obviously I'm not going to be able to get the really pricey ones at this point, but even a less expensive one, I would just be curious to sort of just see, you know, to do some comparisons. I remember when I transitioned from spinning reels to bait casting reels, and you just immediately knew, like, okay, there's something different going on here. It just felt more powerful, even when the statistics on the reel didn't seem to indicate that it should be. It just did. So there we go. That's a nice one. So 10K experience, and really nice silver once you get up to the like 2 kilo range on those catfish. So yeah, I'm definitely keeping all that in mind. I'm not gonna like rush stuff out though in terms of videos on those topics, because I just haven't really, without having the direct experience myself or time to talk to other people who have experienced some of the new stuff, and then without having time to process it, I don't want to rush to judgment on anything. Obviously, there were some significant changes with all of the new reels and changes to old reels that will definitely have implications for new players leveling or players who level alts in the future. And because so much has changed, that probably does speed up the timetable of when I'll do another leveling series, and maybe just a regular leveling series, not one where I say like, okay, we're just going to do float or spin or whatever, but sort of approaching it like I would encourage anyone to approach it, especially maybe with a little bit of a slant towards bottom fishing. So we will see. But as you have seen, this spot in just a short amount of time is producing really good fish. It is a nice spot to bottom fish, and if you use like large 1 to large 2 hook sizes, if you choose your baits carefully on which system you're putting them on which rig you're putting them on, you can avoid some of the pain and suffering if you don't want to put your gear through big sturgeon fishing. And if you're going for the big sturgeons, then obviously choosing the baits that are most likely to hit those and increasing your hook size ever so slightly can help you do that as well. So as I was blabbing along there talking, I'm not sure, but I feel like maybe there was a fish on one of the other 2 lines. We don't have long till we're going to jump in that boat and sort of show you the next thing that I want to show you, but it must have been this one. It's probably a very small catfish or a burbot, but it just didn't pull very much. Saw the line moving a little bit, but and just one more time, we are at clip 50. We're casting just slightly left instead of straight out. And this is what it looks like on the map. And this is the ground bait, sorry, PVA. And the big change here from probably what you've already used before for sturgeon and sterlet is the caviar smell as the attractant. Okay, so let's go ahead and we may catch one more fish here right at the end, we'll see. But let's get set up. We're going to do this first. And we still have, you know, we just kind of want to be ready to go by about 5:30 a.m. to start the drifting. And I'm not going to drift the whole day. Don't worry, we're not going to make a super long video. I'm going to do a little bit of drifting, show you my favorite spot to drift, and talk about drifting in general. And then we will probably throw some lures out just to show you briefly a little bit of trolling and what some of the best lures and stuff to use for trolling recently has been. Obviously, you can just look at the records, the weeklies, and see what's been working best. But some of the new lures available here at Lower Tunguska actually have been pretty decent. let's start pulling them in. Small catfish or burbot. Or not. Yeah, it is. But really, a nice little night there in that spot. And like I said, it's got a good bite rate for the type of fish you're catching there. It is really good. So we're going to drift, and we're starting at the very end of the river, sort of the eastern side of the river. Because in the morning, hitting this eastern side, as you saw if you were watching my stream last night, has been really lucrative and really fun for me. So we're going to try it again now and hope that it's about the same today as it was yesterday. And we're doing wacky rigs on all 3 rods. We're sort of going to aim just left of this second buoy out here. And of course that's the very edge of where we can go to in the river. But once we get there, we'll go ahead and get our wacky rigs out and start drifting and hopefully have some pretty decent success here early. The truth is, you can really drift anywhere on the whole river. Anywhere that you can get your boat to, you can drift, and it'll be pretty good, at least from what I've seen. So just real quick before we start catching fish, usually the bite rate is pretty good. I am using 9.8 fluorocarbon line. So I've switched from fluorocarbon leaders to just straight fluorocarbon line. Speculation that it helps bite rate a little bit. I'm not sure, but it's working really good. Size 6 hooks, and just kind of cast it out there. It's not going to cast that far anyway, so I usually just give it full cast. And as you see, it's the same setup over here. It's working really well, so we've got them double set up. And then the third rod that I'm holding is going to be ultralight, and sometimes the bite rate is so crazy that I actually don't ever get in this, hardly into the water before I'm needing to pull it in. And here's an example of that. So we waited just long enough to get a fish on the ultralight as well. I usually will try to give it at least a few seconds to see if we can do that. And this is the right species. So we're catching different whitefish and similar type fish up here on this part of the river by drifting. And there's a pellet. And so again, while we're up here at the very top of it, the eastern part, that's likely going to be what we see is a lot of those types of whitefish and a pretty decent range of markers usually. And so real quickly here, right at the beginning of the day, you can make some really nice silver. And then sort of anything you make past that during the day is sort of just a big bonus, And so even what I've thought about doing, and may do this for a couple of days to see sort of how it goes, but I've thought about just spending, 5 a.m. till noon drifting this first part of the river. I think that's going to be, between 100 and 200 silver pretty quick. And then spending the rest of the day in that spot that we were just at, catching a few sterlet, and then at night some burbot, catfish mixed in, and then just rinse and repeat. I think that would be a pretty decent per hour silver and XP amount, as well as something that I would enjoy a lot because of how, I just enjoy the bottom fishing in particular. And I also really prefer this drifting technique to trolling. Now, I think in my opinion, there's a larger ceiling. In other words, with trolling, if you hit a really good day, you're going to make more silver trolling than you are drifting. But in my opinion, drifting is more consistent silver. You're catching such a big variety of fish by drifting this river. I mean, by the time, if you drift the whole day, the amount of different species you'll have, I mean, it may seem like we're getting a lot of the same species here, but that's just because we're fishing in a spot where these species are showing up. As we drift, it will totally change. The type of fish we'll catch will just sort of adjust as we go. There's a little brown trout. And I will say that, and it could be like the weather, it could just be random. But it seems to me that right now we're getting less markers than I typically do. And I don't know why that is. There's a scary fish for you. I don't know why that is. Could just be random. But I think usually when I drift this section, 75, 80% of these whitefish are going to be markers for me usually. So there's a lot of this typically. Typically we're getting a lot of like 2-3 kilo whitefish, and it's like, whoa. And again, it just adds up so fast on the silver. So all I can say is try it yourself and see how it works for you. I think I got stuck on the... All right, let's lower the friction brake a lot and stand up. See if I can't... It's just not wanting to lift. There we go. Now it's coming up. Oh, wow. It's a nice Linux. 24,000 experience. You just see some amazing things, even just drifting. And you notice I'm in a sort of this rotation right now where I'm not even getting my third rod out at the moment. We might be able to here. There's a whitefish, and that's what I'm used to seeing. Those like slightly over 1 kilo whitefish with occasional bigger ones mixed in. Ooh. And the nice thing about doing this as well, there's Arctic char everywhere, by the way. The nice thing about doing this as well is if you do hook into a taimen or a sturgeon on the drifting, these wacky rigs cost, I mean, these little wacky worms cost next to nothing. I mean, it's not like when a pike, bites off a lure that costs you 100 silver. And so you can be a lot more, I feel like, sort of brave in just like, hey, let's just put it out there. I know there's some really big fish here that we could drift into and wacky rig into, but if that happens, I mean, I've got 4 or 5 of them in my inventory. I'll just pop another one on there, There's some nice whitefish. And this is what I'm used to seeing here at the top. And so maybe I even started earlier today than I normally do. And so maybe that's some of it. Because we were already pretty close up here from being in that sturgeon sterlet spot. I like when we can catch one on the UL and then switch and check the other two. I don't know. I don't think either one of them have a fish on, so we'll go back to UL. For me, at least, I have the best luck when I cast downriver, and so that there's immediately, there's not slack in the line, and so the wacky worm does its little thing, and often a fish just pops on really fast. Where if you cast this way, the way that you're drifting, then there's a lot of slack in the line, and so I don't feel like the fish jump on quite as fast all the time. Humpback whitefish. And per usual, I just feel like the amount of silver we're getting right now, and as you can tell, I mean, we're not working that hard. And the other good news is, I mean, we're using 9.8 fluorocarbon line. That means you could do this with very inexpensive spinning or bait casting gear. I mean, I happen to be using a steelhead here. You don't need a steelhead to do this. And on this line, I'm using a black box. Again, you don't need a black box. I mean, obviously, you could do this with a Saber 60 on a spinning setup and do really well, I think. Another really nice whitefish. Those are just so nice. And I really like those Arctic Amuls as well. I've definitely seen some really nice ones come out on Wacky. And those tend to pop up a lot, for me at least, on cafe orders. It seems like they do. So do you notice this theme here? We have drifted out of sort of one spot and we've drifted into another spot. And this will happen all the way down the river. All of a sudden you'll be catching, like all of a sudden we'll have 4 or 5 sardines in a row. Or, whatever. And so you'll see... I mean, yes, there's always like occasionally a chance of something else, it seems like, coming in as well, but you'll just sort of see a pattern as you're drifting. And definitely going through the holes is good, but also, like somebody was telling me yesterday how they call it 2 trophy, it might have been whitefish or something down here in this 3 hole. So like just sort of in this random area down here. So I would just sort of let the boat drift, kind of try some different spots to drift in, and I think you're bound to run into some really good fish. All right, so let's catch like 1 or 2 more fish here, and then we're going to switch to some lures and at least see 1 or 2 fish. Probably what we'll see is Arctic char, because that's mostly what I'm catching here. But yeah, we're about at the right spot where it'd be a good time to switch anyway. So I'll show you some lures that we've been using when trolling, and we'll do that just briefly. All right, so let's see what the last wacky rig fish are here. It got stuck on the bottom of the boat because I brought it over to the opposite side for some reason. Okay, so let's a 2-gun. Let's have a seat here, and I think I'm just going to worry about 2 rods at the moment. 1 and this one. All right, so what we have is the T1 Shad 12004. And we'll put this one out over here. Let's actually kind of toss them this way because we're going to be turning and then trolling the other direction. And then over here, we're going to use the Salmon T1 Crank 10004. So it's just a different size, but basically the same lure. Blue has been working really well. And then, switching from there to like red, orange. I will say the other thing that has been doing really nice is, and let me see if I have, if this is pretty much ready to go. Yeah, I think it is. So let's throw this on and I'll show you something else real quick. Where'd it go? It's my casting rod. And are we set up decently? Oh, we don't want wacky lure rig. And let me make sure we're okay on, all right, 15, 8, 8.5. We do want a leader of, okay, we'll just do 6.4 because I don't have anything else set up. But things that have been working really well is like the spiker 2s. And so I'll show you this as well. All right. So we've got 1, 2, and then the one that I'm going to be holding. Again, blue. Blue has sort of been the starting point for me. And then we kind of go from there. But this whole sort of 7.5 to 12 section tends to be a really nice place to troll. But then more up in this part of the map, we're seeing a little bit higher bite rate of the taimen, if you were so inclined. But either way, it's been some good fishing. But yeah, the nice thing about this spiker is you catch decent fish on here. Actually, before I was using this on an ultralight setup. This is just a light setup. But this has been performing really nice. And sometimes the big boy lures, you can have to wait a little bit longer in between bites. So it's nice to kind of be constantly catching something. And it's not the ideal time to, I mean, it's going to be a little slower bite rate this time of day, but we're not going to do this super long. I just wanted to kind of show you a couple lures we're using and kind of show you the transition from 3 different techniques, 3 different areas of fishing, and 3 different things that have been very fun, most importantly, but also decent silver and XP here at the new river. Oh, and one thing I want to try that I haven't tried yet is I think I'm going to try putting fluorocarbon line directly on these spinning rods as well. I just want to see, it really felt like it made a difference on the wacky rigs when I went from having leaders to direct line. So I'm just kind of curious if we'll see any kind of change on the main line of the other 2 as well. Usually there's some pretty decent fish right around this 7.5 hole. You've seen a lot of people trolling this area lately. So let's see if we can get anything. So here's our first fish off that's not on the spinnerbait. Small. And we're not catching a lot of fish right now, but if we were, you would see that a lot of them are Arctic char. But as we've talked about in stream, if Arctic char are the perch or the common roach of this place, at least, you know, when you catch the marker Arctic char, those are pretty nice fish to be catching with the frequency that we're seeing them here. So there's a sardine. I've already got a lot of notes on the new river. All right. Let's see where F7 is. Very nice. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to stop the video right before the hot part of the fishing day starts again, but you get the idea. And it really, I mean, like I said, right now, even though the river just came out, it's in a very healthy place. I'm sure it won't always be this strong, but there'll be ups and downs, and so far it's been a really fun place to fish. I miss carp fishing a little bit, and I'm sure we'll go back to some carp fishing soon, but this has been fun. Having so many new species of fish and different techniques and approaches that are really working well has been a real blast. Let's see one more fish if we can. Yeah, those Linux, I think those are also pretty lucrative fish. There's a lot of the whitefish, different fish here that really add up, and you see a ton of them in cafe orders too, so you can do really well. All right, there we go. It's at least a marker on one of the main lines. Of course, it's an Arctic. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know what your experiences have been like here at Tunguska. It's just been a lot of fun. But good luck, tight lines, wet nets. I'll see you next time.